Oh, but they do. Read by Thomas Baxter. I have a habit. I don't usually admit it, but I love searching out old diaries. Most contain nothing. Birthdays sporadically spread throughout the year, or appointments. Some contain small glimpses into the lives of the lost, a small peek through the cracks into the lives of others. Most imagine nothing more than a few lines. Some have a scrap of paper, usually a shopping list, sometimes a poem or a letter. This diary had 8 sheets of A4 paper neatly folded into quarters. The diary itself had nothing written in it apart from, on the 1st of January, it said, "It's New Year." The papers, though, well, they weren't a poem or a letter. They were, well, more sort of a statement, an unburdening confession, I suppose. I've read through these papers 3 or 4 times now, and I'm still not sure what to make of them. And that's why I thought I'd read them again for you tonight. Okay, the top of the first page reads, the 3rd of April. Now at least I knew the truth, and why I told the story then. It must have been ready to come out. After all, it had been in my head, daring me to believe it day after day, niggling deep in my subconscious, hiding, but always there. Like a sleeper agent sent to infiltrate and then lay dormant, until the controlling overlords thought the time was right to release them into the world, prepared to destroy all around them to fulfill their operation. Yes, it was always there. It was Easter, and I was sitting at a hotel bar overlooking the estuary in a small Welsh seaside town. The bar was in a Victorian hotel that had been built to accommodate the influx of holidaymakers and day trippers when the railway arrived in the late 1800s. It commanded a view of the estuary that was second to none. Unfortunately, through the lack of investment, the hotel didn't get the amount of business the view deserved. And so, what was left of the once Victorian elegance was now fading, covered by cheaper attempts to repair and failed good intentions. The whole bar was wood-panelled, probably an arts and crafts update from their second flush of business after the First World War, when a brief flush of optimism took over. Whilst this optimism continued in London and some big cities where the parties carried on through the 20s, until the whole facade crumbled with the Wall Street crash. The perfect example of when trust goes, the whole house of cards will soon fall. Here, out in the countryside, the optimism was only very brief. This fading room had a bar that sat on the back wall facing the window. All the chairs and tables were spaced out around it, and so all could take in the wonderful view. The furniture was old, but had been recovered some time ago, in good quality fabric, in keeping with its age. They were not frayed, but tired. The tables that separated the chairs were all low, designed to hold a drink and an ashtray, and not the modern layout of tables to eat off. The carpet was only there because of its initial quality. but was now paying the price of years of beer spills and feet. The whole place had an air of Savile Row suit that was bought many years ago and so out of fashion, but because of its quality, was still perfectly usable. The food was available, but it was served in the restaurant, yet another reason why the bar that night had only a handful of people, all couples, except me. I was killing time, waiting for our son to come off the train. He was spending a few days with us. We'd rented a cottage, and he said he'd come down from university. I'm always early for things, and thought this was a good place to wait. It was early evening on a cold Easter Saturday. Easter was early that year, and it had been bitterly cold. I suppose that's why we first spoke. I was sitting in a chair by the fire when the ones the other side came free. She had been by the bar for a few minutes, I assumed waiting for her husband. When I came in, I had seen her and a man. He was sorting out the luggage. She had come into the bar just after I had sat down. I had noticed her glancing over a couple of times, and now that the chairs had come free, she had come over and sat down. I smiled politely and said hello, as you do. I was messing with my phone, as everybody does nowadays, and hoped she would do the same. She, however, had other ideas. Trying to get eye contact, a half smile, glancing at every opportunity, until finally I relented and glanced back with a half smile of my own. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I've been standing over there looking at you, and I'm sure I know you. Did you live in Walton?" "No," I said. "No, but I used to work there, up to about 5 years ago." As we slipped into conversation about the town, it appeared she had worked there for 22 years at the council, and I suppose must have seen me around town. "Small world," she said. I thought, in fact, it's not really a small world. The odds of two people who lived and worked in the West Midlands seeing each other in Wales on a bank holiday must be quite high, as most people from there tend to take short breaks in the area. It's something I do. My mind wanders from a conversation, only half listening. I came back when she started talking about some of the town characters who had died in the last few years. A few had moved away, or businesses that had closed. It turned out she was a member of the local history association, and so had a bit more knowledge than the average on the town. I don't know why, really. I very rarely tell anybody I was a policeman, but I had a feeling any minute she was going to work it out. "Aha! That's it!" she said, her voice just getting loud enough for me to look around in discomfort. "It's all slipping into place now. You were around the council when they arrested John McCabe." The very mention of the name had made me cold. It was as though all the windows had been flung open, and an icy blast of winter from the Serbian wilderness had encircled my body and crept over my skin, chilling my bones as it engulfed me. The hairs over my entire body stood up, and my skin lost all its colour. "Are you okay?" she asked, leaning forward a little. I struggled to answer. My brain had yet to catch up with the information it had just been given. John McCabe. It was a name and a story that I had tried not to think about, but was with me in one form or another every day. It was a name that refueled a fire within me that I'd been trying to extinguish, but like a forest fire, burned underground, unseen, unheard of for many years, but reigniting itself in another part of the wood. It now burst into life, illuminating the story in my mind that I didn't want to see. I frantically searched for water to put it out, but there was a desert, and the only thing I could see for miles was John McCabe. It wasn't a mirage. I didn't want to see him. He never came back to work after that day, you know. Was he ever charged with anything? She continued. No, no, he was never charged. I struggled to say anything. My brain was still catching up with what she had just said. She seemed surprised. Oh, it's just that he never came back, and we all assumed you must have arrested him. While she was talking, I took a drink, a long drink, and sat back in my chair, hearing but not listening, until the audio came back. Last we heard of him, he had moved to a small village in the Peak District. Oh, really? I said, regaining composure, and with it, my presence back in the room. I'm not surprised. I'll be honest, I don't know how he can carry on after what I told him that day regards the happenings of the Friday before. I'll be honest, some of the days I struggle. What do you mean? She said with increasing interest. Why? What happened? What had I just said? Why did I say that? What was I thinking? I smiled and thought whether I should tell the story or not. It was a story I had told the brief outline of to friends at dinner parties just after the happening in the hopes for an understanding ear. But I think they thought it was nothing more than a story. I, however, believe it was all true. But I had never really told anyone else, although I was under no obligation to keep it secret. Of course, nobody had ever asked. But why should they? Even if they did, even if they knew the story, which very few did, why would anybody ask about it? From the outside, it was nothing more than a story. But it was what he said, and the look on his face when the realisation hit home. I sat back in my chair and thought for a moment. I suppose I could let you know what happened, if you're interested. Of course, I am. Any local stories are what fascinate me, and the fact that I know him, although I can't for the life of me say why he didn't come back to work. We sat quietly for a few moments, me thinking whether I should tell the story, and her, I'm sure, thinking if she should say anything else, he might change his mind. I was about to speak, but before I could talk, she spoke. I would be very interested to hear this story, you know. As I said, I'm a member of the Walton History Society. Now, as a member, I have access to what they call the Vault. It's basically a computer file that has several security features to log into it. And all members can go in and record anything interesting about their lives or any stories they've heard. But the clever thing is, the Vault can be set a date when the file can be viewed by others. The idea is that stories aren't lost because they may be a bit embarrassing or may cause upset to anybody alive. I try to find interesting stories about characters of Walton's past and present. That's why I know about ones that I told you about before. If I have to be honest, I love a story I can link to the council. I smiled. When she had finished, while she had been talking, I'd been thinking about what I should do if I was going to finally tell the tale, how I should do it. Well, okay, I said. I have a file, a recording of the talk I had with Mr. McCabe. That Thursday when I spoke with him. It was pretty much the same as he said in the interview with the police on the Friday, I know. Because I've heard the original and this doesn't vary in detail at all. What I will tell you, before you hear this recording, is that when I came to the council that day, the day when you remember me from, I was doing a background on him to see what he had said, if it held up. Yes, I remember he came back to work on the Wednesday after the Friday it had happened, and you came in on Thursday and arrested him. No, we didn't actually arrest him. It was actually quite the opposite. Oh, sorry. I keep saying that. It's just that when he never came back, we all thought he must have been. I took another drink. I'd let the cat out of the bag now. I couldn't go back on it. Could I? I smiled. I'm not sure it'll be the sort of thing that you're looking for. It's not the sort of interesting fact. It's more of a thought-provoking story that I can't really prove one way or another, but if it's true, what he told us, if it happened in this day and age, I suppose I think about it every day. Okay, now you really have me interested, she said. I smiled. I would be happy to let you hear it. But no copies and no notes, just hear it. And I will tell you what I told him on that Thursday. If, after that, you still want to put it into your history society, that's fine. But lock it for 20 years or so. I think Mr. McCabe would probably want to be left alone. I could see more bits now, but I think you'll just get a better understanding when you hear it all. I picked up my phone and went to my cloud storage. Although I hadn't listened to it for a long time, I found the file easily. In truth, I knew exactly where it was. It was a sort of superstition that each time I went to files, I had to see it. So I kept it towards the top. I opened the file. Before I pressed it, I said, whilst there's nothing secret, there is no reason not to show you. It must be remembered that he is still alive. She smiled and nodded. Okay. This is a recording of the interview I had with John on the Thursday. It's very informal. Whenever I had to do these follow-ups to check information, instead of telling them the story, I got them to tell me. I sat them down, somewhere calm, a pub if I could, and get them to chat and tell me the story. What happened from when they got to the police station, that sort of thing. The first thing they can remember about the day. Tell me what happened and what was said. The reason is that they already told the story. I want to hear the same story, if you like, to make sure it matches. Many don't. John's did. I placed the phone down on the table and pressed play on the recording. I passed her one of the earphones. We were in a pub, so there's a little background noise. It starts with my voice. Okay, John. If you could tell me exactly what happened on Friday from the first thing you can remember right to the last. Well, at the police station, firstly, I had a phone call to my wife. I asked her if she could get back home and come to the police station. One phone call, it is actually true. I always thought that was just for dramatic effect. Then, the interview room was just a table and two policemen. They asked me what you just did about what happened from the beginning. Okay, John. So, if you could tell me again exactly what happened, just so I can make sure I have all the facts and haven't missed anything. Well, I was at work. I had a half day coming and I'd been saving it for then. My wife, you see, was spending the day down in London. She goes every year with her sister. They see a show, Christmas shopping, a meal after that sort of thing. They're always back late, and she didn't know I had a few hours going, so I thought I could take them while she was away. I thought I could use it to perhaps get her a Christmas present, save all the last minute rushing around 2 days before. She always moans about the men who leave things till Christmas Eve. So I thought, get mine done early this year. So I had made sure to get into work a little early, just after 8, which means I could leave at noon. I thought I'd have a little stroll around town, look around the market first. They sort of have a bric-a-brac antique sort of market on a Friday this time of year. Jane, my wife, likes that sort of thing, presents with a bit more thought, not just a quick run into a perfume or department store to grab the third most expensive bottle at 2 o'clock on Christmas Eve. I was just going to have a look at the market, and then, if I saw anything, perhaps pop into the pub and do a bit of research on my phone. I was going to use the pub at the top of the town, as I know they have a sort of heated patio area, and I thought of treating myself to a bottle of red wine and a cigar. See, I don't smoke, but at Christmas I do treat myself to a cigar. My wife, doesn't know. The policeman asked me, is there a lot of things your wife doesn't know about you, sir? You police, you don't have much of a sense of humour, do you? Some. Please carry on, sir. Yes, well, I had a morning like most others in an office. Nothing very exciting. Like all jobs, I suppose. It's the little things, though, that get you through. Opening the emails, hoping for something interesting, but no problem has arrived overnight that would make the day a bit more interesting. Last Friday, like most days, nothing. Then the first cup of coffee, perhaps a biscuit, or even a cake if it's someone's birthday. Then get on with the grind of office work. It's mind-numbing, you know. You work hard for weeks, sometimes months, on a project. Each day being pushed to get things done, to keep up with things finished, and then when you have finished, it all gets filed away and nobody ever looks at it again. Oh, sorry, it's my pet hate. Thousands of people doing hundreds of jobs that aren't really getting anywhere. Anyway, sorry, I was going through the day. Oh, yes, well, on to lunch, then I suppose on a warm day you can get away from it all, down by the river or even at the top of the lower road car park where the common building touches the town. But in winter, I usually end up staying in my office, or sometimes I may go to the local cafe. If you time it just right, you can have your lunch a little later in the afternoons. Not so bad. One coffee about 3:30 and then a final push. Last Friday, I started like all other days, emails, coffee, nothing interesting. Apart from, I did pop into the toilet when Mr. Broom, my boss, he came round. I don't want to involve myself in tasks that was going to take me away from my afternoon. I had it all planned. I was looking forward to it. At 12, I slipped on my coat, left a note on the computer in case anybody needed to know I was booked all afternoon, and headed out into the street through the side doors. It was a dull day, even for the beginning of December. It hadn't really got light all day. I slipped into the street unnoticed by staff or passers-by, and I walked with everyone else, all of us just invisible to each other, all insulated in our own worlds, work and phones and Christmas, or just getting lunch. Even at this early hour, you just felt the light was just starting to go. It was getting cold. A sort of wet haze, a mist hung over heavy and dark over the town. It was just damp. It was that damp, dank cold that you could see. It dropped around you like a wet blanket, clinging around you and staying with you, slipping down your neck through your clothes, slowly creeping over you, entering through every crevice, up sleeves and through buttonholes, down collars, to your skin, and through your skin slowly stiffening your muscles. That cold that makes your bones ache. My big coat offered no defence, and I remember stopping for a moment to pull my collars up against the cold and bury my hands deeper into my pockets than they would allow, to block the cold from getting in. It was pointless. The atmosphere made the air visible. You could see the damp, freezing fog. It hung in the town, and the light from the stalls looked hazy. In a way, welcoming. A sort of cosy, I suppose. Like in the windows of cottages on Christmas cards, then the frost just covering the windows and the glow of the happy interior shines out from black, bleak, dark winter nights. The chatter of the stallholders was heightened because the air had subdued all the background noise. I could hear the chatter, but it was not really registering with me. I was lost in thought. I had a whole afternoon to myself. As a married man with children, a stolen afternoon is a treat. You may only get one once a year, and I have to say I was looking forward to it. The market was busy, with it being close to Christmas, and I was sure I was going to find something. I began to wander around the stalls, lost in my own pleasures. There were a few nice things, a Victorian hand-blown decanter, with a small fault that had relegated it to the market. Still pretty, but not of any value. A set of moustache mugs from not a great maker, but fun. A 1970s Oxen table lighter. I liked it very much. It took me back to my childhood. We had one very similar at home when I was younger, but would Jane? I suppose I must have been just moving up towards the books halfway up to the other side of the town when I first became aware of him. A figure captured in my peripheral vision. He was a small, neat man in a mackintosh and a trilby. Not the sort of hat you'd see too often, I thought. But around this sort of bric-a-brac markets, you get all sorts, and I paid him little attention. I had seen him, but I thought nothing more about it. I just carried on looking through the books. I always look to see if I can find The Secret Island. It was my wife's favourite book. It was one of the author's first books published. That's why an early copy is so hard to find. I had been deep into the books when I spotted a copy of the Jackie Annual from 1978. I thought it would be a great stocking filler. I'd opened the cover and I noticed him again. At the side stall, very close to me. As I glanced, he did so too, and a moment of realisation, smiled and walked towards me, stretching out his hand. "Hello, John? Cold, isn't it?" You know that feeling when you sort of recognise a face, but can't quite think why or where from? Happens to me all the time. When I'm watching a programme, I'm forever flicking through Google trying to find out what somebody has been in before. Miss half the damn show. "How's your dad and mum?" he said. "Oh, they're fine," I said. But now my attention was lifted from the bookstall and fully on him. But who is he? He seems familiar, but no name would come. He fell easily into conversation with me and appeared to know me. This was the point I should have asked him who he was, but I had already been talking to him for maybe a minute or so, and the more time passed, the harder it became, especially when he seemed to know me, or possibly my dad. That's how I thought it must have been. He must have worked with him. Yes, that must be it. "Work around here?" he asked. "Yes, that's right. I've been at the council for nearly 7 years. Well, too long, really. I should have looked for another job, but you know how it is." I could feel myself slipping into the half-joking, half-truths you always fall back into when you're not too sure what to say. He interrupted my flow, asked if I was on my lunch. Yes. Well, no, I have the afternoon off, and I've just finished at lunch, so I suppose, yes. As soon as I'd said it, I wished I hadn't. He smiled a little and said, "Well, why don't you come back to my office and have a drink to get warm?" Well, I don't know. I tried to think of any excuse I could to get some Christmas gifts, but he lifted his glance from the books and said, "Well, you just come and get warm, have a drink, and then come out and finish your shopping." Whilst he was talking, he put the book he was holding and started to walk away. I did the same, I suppose out of politeness, and followed him. He kept talking as we walked, about family and about Walton. I must admit, there was some things I didn't know about Walton. Although I worked here, I don't really know that much about the town. I had to admit, we walked past the end of the market and past the bus station towards the railway bridge that takes you to a small industrial estate just on the edge of the town. There are a few old factories scattered about before you get to the new. It was here, I suppose, I had started to notice that the mist was building, getting thicker, slowly becoming a fog, moving into town. Like a tide, filling in an estuary, filling every crevice and hole, every inlet, as it meandered upstream, filling doorways, bus stations, alleyways, shopping arcades, and post boxes. In fact, anywhere it could creep. The stallholders' conversations had become muffled, lost in a tide of fog, slowly flooding around us. The town seemed to be drowning. As we came to the end of the market near the bridge and started to walk up the hill, on the other side, the fog began to lift a little and sound started to return. I looked behind me and the fog was thick, settling on low-lying ground. Only the taller buildings were visible now, like a dam had been built, and the town was lost below the new waters of a lake. Just under the bridge is one of the biggest old warehouses. To be honest, I thought most, if not all, had been closed, but I didn't get down that end of town too often. I was a little surprised when he said this was where he worked. He must have noticed my surprise, as he started to explain that they were only there temporarily. He took me in and through a small door set into one of the loading doors off the side of the road where, I suppose, all the deliveries came in. We entered and, well, it seemed to be a small warehouse, that sort of place. There were small boxes, all pretty much the same size, stacked near the door. At the far end was another large set of doors, shut. The factory, I suppose. Further along the back wall, 2 more doors that I assumed must have been for offices or perhaps a toilet. He guided me to the left, to the lift. A works lift, you know the type, the metal sliding doors like with a cage. It's lunchtime, he said, so we can sneak back in this way. He closed the gate and we went up 3 floors. The first 2 floors had bare brick walls, but as we reached the 3rd floor, the walls had been plastered, although they could perhaps have done with a lick of paint. He opened the door and revealed about 5 steps up to a corridor with offices on either side. The offices all had windows onto the corridors, so you could see inside. There appeared to be nobody about, as it was lunchtime. The offices were functional, if a little bit old and tired. It looks a bit of a mess, he said. As I say, though, we're getting ready to move. There were lots of shelves where books, I suppose journals were stored. There were a few boxes. They were packing for the move, and it looks like it had started. Each office had a desk, I suppose 2 filing cabinets and shelves all of files and journals, catalogues perhaps. The everyday bits of office life. A holder for pens, a cup, the odd drawer open. There was nothing wrong with the offices, it was just perhaps a sense of difference between what I'm used to working in with the modern office, where the council just keep up repairs and renewals. That, I'm sure, is not quite so easy in a small company. At the end of the corridor, he opened a door and beckoned me into his office, a comfortable room with a desk in the front window, which was opposite the door. To the right was bookshelves filled with books and files, and to the left a fireplace. Once inside, "Please sit down," he said, pointing to a comfy chair behind the door. He busied himself throwing some bits of old paper into the fireplace and lighting it. "Sorry, no heating," he said, "but we do have plenty of wood and boxes to burn. I usually build it up and get the room warm, and then it slowly goes out. Most days it's fine, but it's just on days like today when I should really take a bit more time to keep it going." He asked me if I wanted a cup of tea. You don't see many fires nowadays, let alone in offices. He was busy making the tea and said something along the lines of, "Well, the building's so old, you've got to have something to keep warm, and we're lucky we can burn all the rubbish from the factory." That's when I inquired what they actually make. Like all factories in Walton, at one time, apparently it was a leather factory. But they had to diversify, and now they made military jackets, boots, etc. Apparently. "Won't be a minute," and he went out of the room. I had time to look around the room. It was just an ordinary old office in an old building. The only odd thing would have been the fire. I sat there in the chair by the fire, which was now warming up. I was starting to get warm enough to take off my coat, and by the time he returned with some tea, "Good, getting comfy," he said, settling himself down into the other chair. "I must say it's a very comfortable office." He smiled. "Well, it's not like this all the time. We're supposed to be moving, but with all the current situation, they keep putting off the move. You know how it is, no money for anything. I just hide myself away here and get on with things. Hope nobody notices me," he said, smiling. "Now tell me, what's happened with you? What's your dad been up to these last few years? And your mum? Are you married? Do you have children?" Well, we had been talking, I suppose I had been talking for about a quarter of an hour before he asked me a really strange question. "Are you happy?" he said. I have to say I was caught a little bit by surprise. I paused. Nobody ever asks, "Are you happy?" I think I said something along the lines of, "Yes. Well, I suppose I am. I made a little joke about having to get on with things. It was then when he started to tell me, in life, you shouldn't settle for second best. There's not enough time for second best. Always aim for the best, and then do the best you can. You may not always get there, but at least you can sit somewhere in an obscure office, in late middle age, trying to hide from everything and everybody, and think, well, at least I gave it a go. He smiled again at me, and I nervously smiled back, and, well, I suppose I should be making a move. You'll be needing to get back to work, won't you? Well, not quite yet, he said, pushing himself a little deeper back into the armchair. I'll make us another drink when you just finished telling me about your son. I had been telling him how that at school the other day they had been talking about family trees and explaining that we all have two parents who have two parents and they have two parents each and so on and so on, and we all come from so many people. And he said something strange to me, that when he was talking to his granddad, Tom, he had told him some stories of the past. Well, you see, his granddad isn't Tom, that was my granddad. He had died when I was very young, so he couldn't have been talking to him. But he insisted that he had, and that he had visited him in his bedroom. Why are visions of this kind only visible to one person, and usually when they're alone? That's why I always say it must have just been a figment of some people's imagination. I mean, otherwise they would be all around us. While I had been talking, he had gotten up and rebuilt the fire and was just heading to the door to make a cup of tea. As I said, I was just saying that why do ghosts always seem to appear to just one person in a bedroom and never in the street? You never see a ghost walking past you down the street, for example. As he was closing the door behind him, he leaned in and said, "Oh, but you do." I smiled and found myself laying back into my chair as realization began to embrace me, like the warmth from the fire making me drowsy and alert all at the same time. Sleep slowly took me into its deep cave, dark and far away from the bright lights of wakefulness. His face still tormented me. Who was he? The next thing I remember is being carried out of the window of a burning building and being left on the pavement. I was put into an ambulance and checked out when they were satisfied I was okay. They let me go when I was taken to the police station. That's it, really. Apart from the phone call, as I said before. Okay, John. Well, the officers who interviewed you assumed you must have entered the building, perhaps to get out from the cold, and sat down by a fire built by one of the homeless who used the old building, and then fell asleep. What you then told them was that you had a dream. No, that's not the case. Wait a minute. I said that's what they thought. But in the test, you had no alcohol in your body, and the pub had not seen you. But they did talk to the market stall holder, who said she had seen you talking to a man with a trilby, so obviously that can't be a dream. So they did a little more digging into the factory, and now what they found is quite interesting. The factory has been empty for many years, perhaps 20, although there have been a few tenants who used it for, well, let's say storage, but officially it's been closed for 20 years. Before that, it was a leather factory. What they did was what they call a dredge search. Basically, you search a company's records to see who worked for these companies. We then looked through for individuals, in this case your dad, as you said that you thought you may know him. Unfortunately, nothing came back for your dad. The only name that came back was a Thomas McCabe. Do you know that name? Yes, that was my granddad. That's what we thought. That was him. I'm sorry? The man who I spoke to, that was him. That's why he knew all those things about me and, oh, but they do. Oh God, I've spoken to my granddad. She took the headphones and placed them on the table. She didn't look surprised, as I thought she would. I explained to her that at that moment his face changed to a grey shell. The soul that had inhabited him seemed to just leave, and all that was left was a shell, still speaking and functioning, but robotic. The realization had hit him, and the man had spoken to what was his own granddad. Now, we at the police station, of course, had not believed this to be possible, and that's why we had been sent out to find out why he'd lied to us. The fact is, when I saw the look on his face, I don't believe that he was lying. And while I have no proof, and I can think of no way of proving it either, it will go with me to my grave. You see, I think he was telling me the truth, but I'll never know. I sat back in my chair. She smiled and thanked me. She still didn't really look shocked or surprised by the story. She didn't believe me like all the others I'd tried to tell before, giving up and not speaking of it. She excused herself to go to the loo. So, will you use it for your vault thing? I asked as she stood up. Oh no, it's your story. You must tell it. I bet it happens more than you think. And she walked away. I thought about what she had said and waited for her to return. A few minutes went past and then a few more, and she didn't return. I went out into the hall and nobody was about. I even asked the lady coming out of the ladies' toilets, but she said nobody was in there. I looked out at the car park, nothing. As I returned to the bar, the gentleman who was in the hall with her when I first came in came down the stairs. Excuse me, I was wondering if I was just talking to a lady who you were with in the hallway earlier and wondered if it's your wife, only He stared at me, a stare that made me stop speaking. His face was lost to the world. This is a man going through the motions of life, waiting for death's sweet release. The silence between us, only a moment, but enough for realization to hit me. And the last hour to now make sense. I think you must be mistaken, he said. I wasn't with anybody, and my wife. She died 6 months ago. So there we are. Oh, and I should probably say, the diary, that belonged to my father.